Hello everybody, and welcome to today's session about the cloud, digital transformation and the new normal. This is a webinar being hosted by Elecosoft and our partners at LoadSpring. So my name is Ben Taunt, I'm a sales manager for Elecosoft, and I'll be talking to you through the parts of the session that relate to my subject. I'm joined here by Asif from LoadSpring, who'll be speaking to you about the cloud hosting part of today's session. So in terms of housekeeping, everyone is muted, so don't worry about any background noise at your end. Colleagues turning up at your desk to ask you questions, don't worry, we can't hear you. That does mean if you do want to communicate with us, the best way to do that is to type a question via the GoToWebinar control panel, and that'll pop up on our screens as we go along. We'll try and read them as we go through, but we'll circle back round to them at the end of the session, and any of them we miss, we'll of course follow up with you afterwards. So this is a live webinar, you're talking to us live, but the session is being recorded. Everything we say and do today on screen is being recorded, and you will receive a link via your email later today that you'll be to allow you to watch back the session, and you can also share that link with colleagues who may not have attended but you think will be interested in the content. So please do share that with you. So in terms of agenda, I'll be talking to you today about the importance of robust construction project scheduling or planning, particularly in the current climate, the importance of having robust plans for your projects, including the visibility across all of those projects, but also touching on some of the challenges around the access to software, particularly in the dispersed environment of having workers scattered around the countries. So I'll be talking from there onto the benefits of using cloud to access applications and touching on how the ability to have cloud that supports multiple applications can be very important indeed. Asif, I don't know if you want to talk about your agenda items.
Yep, I don't mind. Hello, everybody. Nice to meet you all virtually. Thanks for the intro, Ben. LoadSpring will be talking about cloud trends and the pandemic and what challenges that's given us. We'll be talking and introducing you to how to evaluate the correct cloud infrastructure for the applications and focusing very specifically on project control tools rather than general applications, looking at sort of how you try and come up with a decision matrix that works for you. We'll give you an overview of what we think about cloud maturity and the way that we work with customers to help them in that maturity scale. We'll highlight the type of service that we offer, which is a managed platform as a service offering. We'll illustrate the importance of data, and finally we'll summarize with what we think are the key success factors when you're looking at putting project control tools in a unified cloud.
Okay, excellent, thank you. So in terms of Elecosoft, if you haven't heard of us before, we're a software organization who have a number of different products that we drive through to our customer base through a solution of integrated software products. And as well as providing that specialist software, we also have very comprehensive training, support and consultancy services to allow organizations to get the best from their investment in software. And in a world which is obviously going through constant flux at the moment, we're innovating and providing growth to those industries through our scalable platforms. Now, I did say that my main thrust was going to be talking about the importance of scheduling or planning, depending on which territory you're in. And that has never been more important in the current climate we're all operating in. The virus has formed or forced us all to revisit project schedules. Lots of bits of paper were torn up in March and April and plans drastically redrawn. And making sure that you're planning out those projects on tools that can support that need for constant change and evaluation of schemes has never been more important than it is now, including that ability to communicate the impacts of any pauses, of site shutdowns due to identified infections, the reduction in productivity by having reduced workforce available on site, restrictions in obviously the distancing that we were able to put the trades together, and all of the other impacts we're feeling on the ground due to the virus. Having software packages that can support you in the decision-making process has never been more important. There has been impacts on these delays, and there will be continued conversations around who has to bear the brunt of the cost of these impacts. So as a construction main contractor, for example, you need to be able to substantiate the cause and effect that these delays are having on your plans. Keeping the good records that have come about from making these changes and communicating those changes to everybody is going to be vital, making sure you can evidence this with the correct supporting documentation in any claim for any delay. So no one's going to argue that planning has never been important to projects. Of course it has been. But at the moment, we're in a particular environment where the method in which we're planning needs to be very carefully thought out, making sure it supports the environment we're in and is cataloging the right information for conversations that are going to have to come from this period of impact. Now, luckily from Elecosoft, we provide a tool called Powerproject, and we've been doing that for over 30 years, actually. So Powerproject as a planning tool has been available to the market for around 30 years and is very heavily used in certain geographical territories, including Northern Europe, Australia and the like. And it has a strong customer base because of the powerful tools it provides, yet the simple way in which it allows you to access those tools. Now that means it can support construction programs from the most simplistic residential house building schemes, be that an individual house build or through to a scheme of house building. Major infrastructure and civils programs as well. If you look across the London skyline in particular, you'll find many skyscrapers there that were project planned utilizing Powerproject by Elecosoft. And also in certain territories, such as North America, we're helping in energy generation, in renewables, and also in the transmission of those power sources. So there's a strong heritage of Powerproject providing support into those markets, not just in the UK, where I'm speaking to you from, but across the globe through our network of partners and agents. Now, we're not just standing still, we're also making sure we continually reinvest in this product and continuing the evolution of these project controls tools. So we're constantly innovating and not just supporting legacy processes. Now, we've got to today with a strong heritage, but there is a need, as I mentioned earlier, to make sure we're supporting the current impacts on our working environment. And uniquely, Powerproject has some features here that are going to really excel in this territory. So, for example, the comprehensive resource management functionality, allowing us to model out resource effort, capture who was around doing what at what time, what norms we have in terms of the production rates and deliverables from our resources. If we're constrained by resource, Powerproject being able to help you replan your schemes based on the availability of resourcing. Creating an accurate as-built by cataloging all of the different progress updates that are being received on a timely basis, baselining that whenever any change is being received, so we've got that accurate track record of what happened where and when. And not just being constrained to desktop applications, and we'll touch on that again in a moment, but also through the support to mobile devices. And we have mobile applications for capturing progress in particular from build sites. That's things like tablet applications, mobile phone applications to allow us to take photos of what's occurring on site, marking up those photos, saving those annotations into a central location, and using that progress report. Now, we're seeing a surge of interest in that at the moment because the project schedulers aren't necessarily moving around the build site in the way they would have done in normal times. They're fielding out to other colleagues and other operatives who are on site the need to update these project plans, but those individuals not being project experts, having mobile tools to help them support that is vital. And we also touched earlier on about resource management, and calendars has a big impact on that as well. If you're using some of our competitor tools from some large American organizations, for example, you may well be familiar with challenges that come from utilizing calendars around resources, work patterns, and the like. Well, we are at times now where build sites are having reduced workforce but longer hours, with different shifts overlapping so that we can maintain the headroom on site. So being able to have control over those calendars is incredibly important. And also the task work and production rates using norms or changing those values to reflect the changes that are out there. Powerproject BIM and the use of 4D also has an increasing importance in the current climate as we look at the space management across a build site. How do we manage the flow of operatives around the site? How do we provide demonstrations of the work that needs to be performed within a particular period of time? Using 4D animations, linking that inherently straight into the planning is very important. Now, all of that is fine in a sort of a standalone desktop planning environment, but clearly we're at times now where there's never been a greater demand for data. And as if in a moment we'll touch on concepts around data lakes and such. That demand, that thirst for information, as we look to make changes and assess the impacts. So Powerproject by Elecosoft is a scalable solution that can go from a desktop plan through to a full enterprise implementation with databases holding catalogs and information around the projects, therefore driving visibility across multiple schemes so we can pull out from here the KPIs, those key performance indicators, display those through dashboard reports, BI reports, and making that as seamless a process as possible and one that takes the minimum amount of time. So traditional planning often involves locking oneself away in a small room and coming up with a plan that you only then dare share when required. We need to break down those barriers, remove those data silos, and really embrace this digital transformation process that everyone's going through by spreading this information around to everyone. Now that then neatly leads on to the concept of project controls in the cloud. Clearly, to supply that data lake, we need to make sure these applications are accessible to everybody, and that the IT infrastructure behind that is robust, but also is scalable without putting heavy impacts and requirements on our own in-house equipment and our in-house IT teams. We can only spread the adoption of technology if people can physically access it from wherever they happen to be located. And in the current climate, no one can quite say where they're going to be at any given time. So for a number of years, Elecosoft have partnered with LoadSpring to provide cloud-hosted applications. Now, we think that by partnering with an expert in this field, in this case, LoadSpring, that provides lots of benefits to our customers. It means you have a hosting platform that can support a number of different applications. You can get additional benefits by having a cloud that can host not just our tools, but also complementary products that we work alongside. And LoadSpring, as my colleague will talk about in a moment, have presences across the world with strong, secure data centers in the places that are required of them. So we think that means that we can deliver these comprehensive project controls, but without some of the compromises that sometimes have been encountered when trying to push project controls into a web-based environment. And you'll all be aware of other platforms that are out there that try to utilize online planning functionality through purely browsers, and that doesn't give you the power that you need from the Gantt chart-driven comprehensive planning tools that the likes of Powerproject delivers. They are a compromise. There are compromises through that browser-based support that don't come about when you're using robust project control software, but in a hosted cloud environment. So that really leads me neatly on to the next part of our session. So I'll let you take over here.
Thanks very much, Ben. Again, hi everyone, nice to meet you all virtually. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the challenges that we're currently facing by using or as a result of the pandemic. Just seeing if I've got control, Ben.
Yep.
Sorry, yeah. So before we start, we wanted to run a question. So I'm going to let Ben just go through this, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so there should be a poll on your screen now asking you to respond to us about the biggest pandemic-related IT challenges you have. If you'd like to click the radial button next to the challenge that you're mostly finding, whether that's been the adoption of cloud, the support to remote workers, or the security around these platforms. So we'll give you another 20 seconds or so to respond to that, if that's okay.
And it's really interesting to be able to do that across the various people that are on this webinar, because we'll talk about some statistics in a second, and it'd be interesting to see how much correlation that we can grab from what I'm going to present to what we're going to find ourselves today.
Okay, great. I'll close that poll. Thank you, and share the results to screen.
Okay, so it's interesting. So 40% are saying that the largest pandemic-related IT challenge is cloud adoption. 55% are saying it's remote working. 5% saying security. So that's great. Thank you very much all for participating. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly go through my presentation. So cloud trends and pandemic-related challenges. We've done a bit of research over the last sort of 8 months to look at how COVID has impacted us as an industry around the world. And the following statistics that we've gathered from independent sources. First one, which I think is quite relevant, is a construction enterprise use of cloud services has spiked by 63% in the last 8 months. And I think that that's a key indicator that this is something that has been driven by the pandemic and is going to continue to be part of the way that we're working. Secondly, 40% of organizations have reported an acceleration in their move towards the cloud, and that's probably been catalyzed by the pandemic even more so. And interestingly, of the different cloud offerings available, i.e. software as a service, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, which is known as Paas, offerings are growing at the fastest rate compared to all other cloud type of offerings. 26% as well of those surveyed have identified that actually data lakes and the requirement to manage, control, and have access to your data from the applications that you're running is going to be a primary focus for the organizations that they're working with in the next 12 months. As a result of so much cloud usage, one of the interesting stats is that external attacks have increased by 630% as cloud traffic has doubled. And that's probably due to a combination of things, but primarily due to devices, bring your own devices or devices used at home, accessing cloud applications outside of managed networks. And the final stat that I think is quite significant is that 58% of people that were surveyed considered that half of their employees will be full-time remote workers within 12 months. So I think this is quite a significant impact on the way that we're working. It's probably less significant for construction organizations, although lots of construction professionals who typically work in head offices or regional offices will probably start migrating more towards and staying at home. For a site worker and site-based specialist, it's probably a little bit harder for them to work remotely. So I do think that construction might not be as much as 50%, but what we can say is that there is going to be a significant shift to more remote working staff full-time. So how do you evaluate the correct cloud infrastructure for your organization and for the applications that you're looking at? And why is Paas growing? Well, the first thing is to think about the actual applications that you're looking at and think about, okay, so how is the best way to manage these tools? 40 years ago, the scenario was much easier because actually what we had then was enterprise IT, our internal IT departments were responsible for managing all of our applications and our infrastructure. So networking, storage, data centers, servers, operating systems, databases, security, and the procurement of the applications and the application support was all done by our IT teams. And 40 years ago, we had much larger IT teams as a proportion of our overall business. About 20 years ago, we had the introduction of SaaS companies, so software as a service companies, into the construction space. And this typically started with sort of collaboration providers, people like BIW Technologies, who became Conject, who became Aconex, etc., A-Site. But also you've had a proliferation of other SaaS vendors who now provide sort of the basic infrastructure that we use as companies. So think of Microsoft 365. Most organizations now are consuming Microsoft's tool sets, Outlook, and the Microsoft platform of tools via its web service. So we're consuming those via a SaaS offering. When it comes to project control tools, though, they're slightly different because they're probably being delivered by a number of different vendors. We don't just use one vendor's full stack of tools. We probably need to have a number of different tools from a number of different vendors. And actually, we probably need to have better control and access to the data. So as a result of that, we've had two further offerings that have started to emerge. We've had infrastructure as a service, which is where your infrastructure is provided by a third-party organization that provides you data center, networking, storage, servers, and virtualization. But your IT teams are still responsible for your operating systems, databases, security, support, and the applications themselves. And then platform as a service. And platform as a service, as we said, was the largest growing sector of all the cloud services that are now available. And that's probably due to the fact that actually most of the activities, including the support to the applications themselves, is actually provided by your partner. And as an organization, what you're typically responsible for doing is to actually procure the applications themselves. Once you've given the applications to your service provider, it's up to the service provider then to provide everything else, including your support to those users. So as an organization, what are the offerings, and what do we need to think about before we try and select the appropriate cloud offering for our project control solutions? I think that many of the organizations we talk to, we talk about the business value that they're trying to achieve. And actually, these can be a long list and can be quite varied from organization to organization. But when we look at specific project control applications, what we tend to find is that there's a range of core elements of business value that they're really focused on. They're focused on potentially multi-application support because they're using 3 or 4 versions of the same application. They're looking for one environment to hold not just one application, but 5 or 6 applications from maybe 4 or 5 different vendors. They could be looking at data sovereignty issues. If they're dealing with specialist secure projects or government funded projects, they might need to know exactly where the data is going to reside. There often is a requirement for a micro and macro disaster recovery plan. So you've got a warm DR service also part of it. You need to have really robust security. If you're managing multiple applications in a single environment, you need to have really good application security and infrastructure security. Other items include integration options. And actually, as you start looking across these elements and trying to think, okay, what's important to me, you'll see that you can have quite a lot of this delivered on-prem, but because we've de-invested from our IT teams over the last 30 years, we don't usually have the resources, the funding, or the expertise in our IT teams to provide all of those services internally. And if you look at the IaaS and the SaaS columns, a lot of those elements are missing, and actually Paas tends to provide many of these business value items as part of its standard services. We're just going to do another quick poll now, so I'm going to hand you over again to Ben.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. So let me just share this question with everybody. And same approach, please. If you could let us know where you are with your organization's cloud maturity, be that entry level, some capability, or if you'd like to rate yourself as enterprise level cloud. And we'll just give that another few seconds whilst you what delegates choose their selections. Okay, it seems like most of the votes are in now, so I will close that poll and again share the results with you all.
Excellent. So interestingly, cloud aware and enterprise seems to be the majority of people. 45% of the respondents said they're enterprise level, and 35% are saying they're cloud aware, with only 20% saying that they're entry level. And look, these are sort of arbitrary categories: entry, cloud aware, or enterprise. Can I just take over the screen again, Ben? Thank you. So thanks for doing that survey. We often at LoadSpring refer to a cloud maturity scale, because actually entering and using the cloud as part of your business transformation process is key. And typically most of the organizations that start working with us, we call entry level. Now, this is nothing to do with their size or the number of employees they have or the type of projects they have. It's more how they're engaging with the use of cloud technologies. It starts at entry level, where they're thinking about using cloud. They've seen the advantages of it, the flexibility of it, and cost tends to be quite an important driver for them because they're looking at one application to put on the cloud. And typically most organizations start at that level. Our role then is to work with that organization to move them through this maturity scale to get them from entry to cloud aware. And at cloud aware, we're talking about the organization having a cloud strategy that's looking at not just managing one application for a program or a project of works, but looking at a single cloud to manage 2 or 3 of its core project control tools. And if you're looking at a number of tools, security becomes really important. The performance of those individual tools becomes really important within that single environment. And then the potential to integrate those tools. So we would argue that about 25 to 30% of our customers are at that cloud aware level. The final level is the enterprise, and that's where everyone wants to be. So this is where business transformation for these organizations is absolutely about having a really clear, formal cloud strategy as part of their business drivers. Cloud first being there, they're very clear on having one single unified platform to manage all of their project control applications. Security is a given, it's got to be critical and really high level security. Performance, every application needs to perform as well as it possibly can. Enterprise adoption becomes really important here, and along with adoption becomes support. So they need to be supported, or the user base needs to be supported well to encourage them to use the platform really well. So it is the vehicle by which users are actually accessing the key project control tools that they need to. And as a result of that, what you have is you have a centralized command and control reporting function that's delivered to you, because actually if all your teams are using all your tools within a single unified cloud platform, you can monitor and manage and report on exactly what's being used, by whom, when, what licenses you've got available, when are those licenses needing to be renewed or maintenance agreements come up. But you've also got the ability to start capturing all the data that sits underneath each of these applications, which is a very important concept. So from LoadSpring's point of view, we're a managed service provider, but we want to work in partnership with your organization. And key to that is your IT teams. Your IT teams run the infrastructure of your business, but are also responsible for your key applications such as HR, ERP, and CRM systems. What LoadSpring is also, LoadSpring is responsible for managing those core applications to do with project delivery. So we're looking at scheduling applications, estimating tools, geospatial tools, contract management, BIM, CAD, risk, could be FM tools. And our view is that we want to work closely with your internal IT teams to provide a consistent service so that your users who are using project control tools are working with our teams, and we work closely with your IT team to give your overall service back to your business. So for our final poll, Ben.
So there we go. Do you believe that having all project controls in one centralized cloud would make your team more productive? Let us know your views.
So yes, no, or still not sure.
So I'll give it another 3 seconds. And there we go. That's the votes in and the results on screen.
Great. 61% of people think that having a centralized unified cloud platform for your project control tools would give you greater productivity. 17% say no, and 22% say unsure. Thank you very much, Ben. I'll just continue. Thank you. Just a couple of more slides from me. So data, I mentioned data previously. One of the things that we're looking at is something called a data gateway model. We understand that as an industry, we're using more technology than we've ever used before for the various areas of work, whether it's estimating, scheduling, design, geospatial, risk, etc. And these tools are being produced by more and more vendors, and there's more data being generated from every single tool that we're starting to use. And as a result of that, there is a lot of data that is now being generated on the average construction project, whatever that is. And actually we can consume those tools and access that data through a number of methods. So we can use a software as a service platform from a vendor and access a tool that way. We can have a local install of a particular tool on my PC, or I can use it via a network server, or I can have a platform as a service. Each of these tools are often written in different operating systems and will produce different outputs of data. And some of that data is structured, some of it's unstructured. But what's really clear is that we've got lots of data in probably quite inconsistent formats being generated. And as we identified earlier, one of the key priorities for organizations over the next 12 months is to start having data lakes and trying to pull this data together. One of the challenges I think many organizations are facing is that this is either something they're going to do now or is part of what they're doing, but they're in a situation where they're creating an environment which is full of unstructured data. So rather than creating a nice pure data lake, they're creating data swamps. From LoadSpring's perspective, we spent 20 years looking at managing various project control applications in the cloud. And one of the things that we've been doing for many years is to link applications together, because our platform allows you to host and manage any number of tools together. We can start putting tools together so that actually from a reporting perspective, you start looking at cost and schedule together, or you start looking at cost and risk together. And by allowing us to pull these data, pull data from different applications together, we're giving you data ponds. And on top of that, we're implying reporting tools and business intelligence tools to give you some insight into actually what's going on in your projects. By doing that in LoadSpring's environment, what we're enabling you to do is start to structure and cleanse your data so that when you need to pull it to your data lakes, it's actually being pulled in a different way. That data is already structured, already purified and cleansed, so that when you use your machine learning or algorithms over the top of it, or BI tools over the top of it, you're going to get a lot more value out of it. You don't have to go through that swamp cleaning exercise. Final slide, and I know we're just running slightly over time. What do we think the key success factors of delivering and deploying applications on the cloud? Our view is that number one is security. Data security is critical. You've got to make sure that the environment is absolutely secure and that your data is safe. Secondly, support is really, really important. That's support not just on the infrastructure, but on the applications. Your users need to be supported when they're using different tools to do their project control roles. Time to value, it's really important that actually the deployment of new applications is done really quickly and seamlessly. Once you've got your unified cloud available and your applications hosted in there, you should be able to set up new projects with new teams with the set of project control tools that you've identified in minutes rather than weeks or months. The platform itself should be able to manage lots of tools. As an industry, we don't use just one vendor's selection of tools for all of the different functions that we run as project control professionals. We all use a range of tools from different companies. So actually the tool itself, the platform itself needs to be able to manage multiple tools. We need to be able to manage multiple tools and get insight from those tools. So there needs to be a BI capability, a business intelligence reporting capability, to show us actually what are we doing on our jobs and what could we do differently moving forward. The platform itself needs to have a really strong SLA and a guaranteed uptime, because if we are putting our project controls tools in it, it needs to be managed effectively and always available when we need it. And finally, all the individual tools that we're using work really differently. So actually the performance of those tools needs to be managed and monitored independently, and specifically for the requirements of each tool. So when you're hosting a GIS tool with a scheduling tool, with a risk tool, it's just not one environment for all three tools. You'd have to build, you need to be able to build specific environments to enable each application to work as best as possible. And that's all for me. Questions and answers session. Ben?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you do have any questions for us, I mentioned earlier, please do type them into the GoToWebinar control panel. And we'll do our best to answer those for you. So someone's mentioned that barrier to cloud adoption is the requirement still to have standalone project controls tools. And we certainly recognize that. That's why certainly at Elecosoft, we haven't gone with a cloud-only strategy. And we do provide tools that support that sort of standalone offline working still. So I appreciate those concerns. Someone's asked a question about software rolling into other dimensions such as asset management, and I guess that plays the piece you were talking about earlier, Asif, about having multiple different products from different vendors on your platforms.
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the key things, I mean, BIM, digital twin, asset management, it's all sort of quite murky areas that are starting to converge into one, which is all about data and the ability to reuse appropriate data at different stages of your project. The sort of the holy grail would be to have one platform that takes you from design or concept all the way through to redevelopment and includes that asset management phase. We want to be able to reuse data. Having applications in a single cloud that allow you to do your design function, your construction function, and then your asset management function enables you to have all your data sets in one environment. So the ability to move data across and share data and populate applications with historical data from other applications, I think is much easier.
And absolutely, from an Elecosoft point of view, within our product portfolio toolset, we have tools for maintenance management as well, and looking to integrate those with BIM being the common thread between them. From a cloud point of view, we've got questions around the actual data centers themselves in terms of location, inclusion within EU rules and the rest of it. Is that something you can answer for us?
Yep, absolutely. So our UK customers, we have a primary data center in the UK, and we can also provide in-country data sovereignty. So secondary data sovereignty can also be in the UK. We have strategic data centers. Historically, we've had them around the world. So we've got a couple in the US, Canada, Japan, UK. We launched Australia at the start of this year. LoadSpring is also just about to announce a global partnership with a major global infrastructure provider. So going forward, our capability to have and host data in different countries will be significantly greater than it is at the moment. So we've got strategic data centers which we'll continue to run and manage for all of our customers. But going forward, if a new customer says, look, we need a data center in Germany or in Spain or in France or wherever, or in the UAE or Saudi Arabia, we'll be able to support them with our global partnership.
Excellent, that's good and reassuring to know. What about speed of access in terms of getting one of these systems set up? So from an Elecosoft point of view, that's very straightforward. We provide the applications almost instantaneously. If you're going for a full enterprise deployment, we take you through an implementation process to determine what parts of software you want to utilize and make sure we tailor, customize implementation to reflect your priorities and business processes. But in terms of setting that up in a cloud environment, Asif, what's the sort of timescales we're looking at?
Yeah, typically, I mean, look, when you're looking at deployment, it depends on the application itself, the number of users, etc. But we can deploy in days or weeks rather than weeks and months, which is typically the case with traditional software deployment. So typical IT teams may take 3 to 6 months to deploy a range of applications, whereas customers will come to LoadSpring and within a week to 2 weeks, we will have a platform available and then ready to use the application that they've hosted with us. So I think within maximum 2 weeks, you could have your Powerproject users using Powerproject in the cloud via LoadSpring.
Good.
I mean, obviously, if you're an existing customer, you can do it straight away. If you've already got a LoadSpring cloud, we can set up a new project and give a new team access to tools that you've already got hosted in there within seconds. So that 2 weeks is about you starting from net new with LoadSpring.
Great. Okay, well, on that positive note, I think we'll draw the webinar to a close there. There are no additional questions that have come in. But when you do leave the session, there is a feedback form that allows you one last opportunity to let us know what you felt about the session, whether you have any interest in the products and tools that have been mentioned today, and also any additional questions you'd like either of us to come back to you on. So certainly from my point of view, thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Yep, and me. Very nice to meet you all virtually, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.